My name is this is interesting. My name is Marshad Burton. I don't have a mic, so it sounds pretty shitty. But I also go by Will or XM or just Will. Um so this is the introduction to Voodoo. Voodoo is a three-part series that I'm working on, and it's just something in the works. I'm not very good at drawing myself, and I don't know many people who do draw, but I write a lot, and I went. It's just the intro, just me relating to y'all what the story is about, and giving y'all some insight into what my mind is trying to conjure up right now. And so yeah, the first thing that I want to explain when it comes to voodoo is the idea of how the world works. In voodoo, there are three different adjacent worlds, essentially. The first world, the world that existed before all of them, right? It was called the overworld. The overworld existed in its own dimension. You know what I'm saying? You have in between or right next to the overworld, all right? If you would, to the right of the overworld, there's the living world. And the living world is where we live, humans, all of our planets, all of our stars, all of our galaxies, and so on. The overworld is exactly like that, except that it's a different universe entirely, right? The planets are different, the setup of the stars and the places they are in the sky are different, right? It just is a differently formed universe, different than our own. But the rules remain mostly the same as we know them. All right, because I'm getting to this real quick. Okay, there's a third world. It's called the underworld. Now, the underworld is unlike the overworld or the living world in a sense where the underworld has its own rules by which the world abides by. There's only two directions in the underworld. That's east and that's west. But we will get into that later, okay? There's two directions, the east and the west, all right? The west is extremely hot. The east is extremely cold, and that's the underworld. Now, the living world, that's our world. That's where the story first starts, right? It takes place there to begin. You have a character, his name is our main character, if you would, but his name is Beck Carey, right? He's a guy, he's a young dude. He's about 18, 17 when the story first starts. And when the story first starts, we have him fighting like a few guys in the forest in the ravine, and he's like trying to fight his way back out and stuff like that because he's known as a pretty violent individual. And we learn that this isn't his first rodeo, right? He's been down these roads multiple times, and he worries his aunt who takes care of him. And so we introduce Beck as a sort of force of nature, right? He's fighting five different guys, and he comes out on top. That is, if that's not a force of nature, I don't know what it is, right? He gets hospitalized because of his injuries, of course, because fighting five other individuals, I would assume that you will probably be hurt. So we introduced the world on a human's perspective, right? How we would know it, how we would examine it, how we would see it, how we would experience the world is how the world is introduced in voodoo. But things do take a turn, and we're let in on what the story really wants to encapsulate. I want to showcase multiple parts of voodoo. I want to showcase the supernatural parts because there are supernatural parts, okay? And I want to showcase the human parts of it. The parts that are like me and you, right? I want to showcase us in the light where it's like how would we experience this world that is shifting and changing because I describe voodoo as the beginning of the end of a story, right? So we're just starting to watch it, but it's already at its end. It's already had its peaks and valleys, and this is just its resolution as a whole. But we are seeing it, right? Our story is unfolding before us as we can't understand it being what it is, right? Blah 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 blah. The main driving force of life. Imagine you're immersed in the world of voodoo, right? Imagine you're immersed in these three different universes which are adjacent to each other, right? Imagine this is your home. Imagine this, you are a Beck's neighbor. I don't know. Imagine you are the neighbor of Beck, right? And so this is how your world operates. This is how your world of voodoo operates. So any living thing, any living being, plant, animals, humans, so on, I'll get to that. They all influence the world in a way which signifies that they have a sort of energy about them, right? So, as we all know, people have sort of a presence in the world, as do plants, as do animals. How do we interact with the world around us is the question, right? Well, plants, they absorb oxygen from the air and they release CO2, as in carbon dioxide, and they go through a process of constantly producing this and living, right? Thus, they have energy. Okay. Again, we are in the world of voodoo, so please do not call me crazy. All right. Animals, they influence the world by hunting, by excretion, right? By birthing, rebirthing, dying, and so on, right? Okay, that makes sense. Humans, we have the ability of thought and external awareness that we do indeed exist and that we can influence the world around us in ways which prove our existence, right? We have knowledge and we have reflection. I always ask myself, what is above a human, right? Because humans can really just say they're gods, right? Sure, right? But what if there was another being like a human? Would they call themselves a god? And then I ask myself, what will make them over us or us over them the actual gods, right? Who is the top dog, really, right? But before we move there, I want to discuss the idea of chaos, because chaos is the driving force of life. Essentially, chaos, we are on voodoo, okay? We are speaking about voodoo. But chaos is a driving force of life. It gives energy onto a being to allow them to interact with the world around them in certain ways. A plant can breathe, animals can reproduce, humans can think. Sure, a human can do all of these and above, right? But an animal cannot think as well as a human, and a plant cannot reproduce as consciously as an animal, right? So the animals have larger amounts of chaos than plants, which allow them to influence the world in greater ways than plants, right? Humans have greater amounts of chaos than animals and or plants, which allows them to influence the world around them in different ways. Now you might ask, what does chaos have to do with any of this? Okay, sure. It's just energy for life to be able to exist, right? But my idea behind chaos is more than that, right? Chaos is more than just the driving force of life. Sure, you can say that a soul would be, right? But we get into that, okay? Chaos, the more you have, the greater your influence on the world. So what if one human has more chaos than the next? We get into this thing which I would call amongst humans gravity, right? You can become famous and you can become influential. Your personality just draws people in, right? You ever heard of that? Someone who is just magnanimous. You're just amazing, right? Or you become a superstar ball player, right? But your body can only, your soul is what it is, but this body can only hold so much chaos before it destroys itself. Imagine a water hose, right? A yard hose or a fire hose, right? One end, right? Okay, one end is shut off the hose, and the other end is pushing water in the hose constantly, right? The hose is going to expand, right? But eventually, too much water flowing through this hose will burst the hose, right? And water goes everywhere. You've destroyed the hose. It implodes on itself, explodes, right? The idea behind chaos is that your body is a hose. Some people's body has a garden hose in it. Some people's body has an IV tube, while others people's bodies are capable of holding massive amounts of chaos. But there is a threshold for every living being. No matter what your level of being able to tolerate chaos is, there's a threshold. Some people get terminally ill, okay, in voodoo, in the world of voodoo, because their houses are, or their souls is what it really is, are incapable of housing as much chaos within it as the outside world puts onto it. Now, before we move any further, disclaimer: every soul, every living being constantly transmutes chaos through their bodies on a day-to-day basis. So you pulling it from the air around you, from the people around you, from the living things around you. You're basically, it's like a water cycle, right? Everything gets it and it goes back around. It's like a cycle, right? It's recycled and it's recycled and it's recycled. But you can also steal it from those things around you. We will get into that when we get into the gods. Okay. Anyways, so I ask again, what is higher than a human? What is stronger than a human? What possesses more chaos than a human? Beck in voodoo is just a guy who is actually broken because of the hardships that he's endured through his life. He refuses to feel sorry for himself, which leads him to thinking that everyone else around him refuses pity also. He's one of those people with so much pride that it's impossible to tell them that they can rely on another individual, as their pride will not allow it. So Beck is a guy who refuses to give in to what he calls human oversensitivity. He thinks that he has to be this force of nature, essentially, in order for him to get through. He refuses to pity himself, and he refuses to feel sorry for himself. He just wants to win, is what he says. He just wants to win. He always just wants to win. He can't lose, is what he says. You know what I'm saying? Or he gonna die trying. So Beck, essentially, is kidnapped in voodoo. You would think that he was kidnapped by all of his enemies, which he has numerous. He has numerous enemies. Beck is a menace, all right? But no, he didn't get kidnapped by one of his enemies. Actually, when he got into the fight with the boys, he ended up killing one of the boys, which he was not aware of because he was kidnapped and he was not able to face that crime, the justice for that crime. His aunt, indeed, did go through a lot because of who she is and how her family status is, but we'll get into that, okay? Anyways, chaos. That's where we're at. Chaos. Those beings with even higher chaos than humans, right? Because there is a point where you are incapable of surpassing this threshold because you are a human. There is a top line, right? You cannot move past here because you will either A, die, or B, die, right? There is zero way to maneuver around this. You get too old, you die. You get too much chaos, you die. You're a human, right? That's it, right? But what if something was able to break through that barrier and then push through to the other side in order to gain even more? What would that gain look like? Nature, right? Yeah, you would think nature. Okay, so what is nature, right? Well, fire, water, the ground around us, air. Okay, that makes sense, right? Nature, Mother Nature will be the next tier. Makes sense, but I wanted it to be more practical. I wanted it to be more literal. I wanted it to be less pentagram and more man, right? And so what I thought of was God, right? Sure, yeah. I mean, maybe that's not the next level of consciousness, but I think it's a pretty valid one, right? To think about, right? But if we think we're gods as humans, why wouldn't God believe themselves to be God? And how would this God act was my thought. Like, I believe that evil, good, wrong, and right are all subjective experiences based on who's experiencing it. As animals, they don't view right and wrong usually as humans view right and wrong. They're animals, right? They don't have that level of consciousness. We have decision making and empathy, which allows us to work and cooperate in a group. I thought about God, right? And for a being to consider themselves above, to consider and know themselves to be above the rest, I looked at it as one of two ways, right? One of two distinct possibilities, which there are way more, right? And I'm just pressuring my mind to consider these things, right? So, one of two distinct possibilities in voodoo. Either you become more empathetic because you can better understand the pain and suffering of others, or you become less empathetic because pain to you is all a subjective experience. You're thinking to yourself, this person is going through pain, sure, but so is that person and that person. Your pain will end eventually, but is your pain any less or more painful than my own? I made the gods in voodoo selfish. So the overworld, we get to the overworld. And the overworld is the home of the gods. The gods possess chaos, but they possess much more chaos than any other being thus far we've spoken of, right? You have humans, right? They possess tons of chaos. There is no number that I want to utilize to level this out, but we're just going to make the next tier, all right? The next tier is gods, right? They have tons of chaos. They live basically forever if they're lucky. And some of them are pretty evil by our standards, right? There's a lot of them. There's about 26 of them in voodoo currently that I have written. But prior to this, when the story, at the beginning of the story, right? Because this is the end of a story, right? This is the beginning of the end of a story, right? And so at the beginning of a story, there were way more, but we'll get into that. There's about 23 to 26 gods so far that I've written in voodoo, and they're really called titans. That's what I call them myself, but that doesn't matter, all right? They're called gods. They call themselves gods, and you will call them that also. All right, so these gods, right? They have specific powers tailored to their own blood, essentially, right? So you could be born as any number of these powers, right? With any number of these powers, right? You only have one though. You only have one. You could be born within any kinship of these powers because each god belongs to a certain kinship. And this kinship essentially is gods who possess the same power. It's like a family or a clan or a group, right? A motherfucking clique, I guess you can call it. More of a clique than anything with how they act. It's more of a clique than anything, okay? It's just like, yeah, you got the same power as me. Okay, oh, we're both Sagittarius. Well, I love you, you know what I'm saying? Basically, is how it is, okay? It's more of a clique than anything. But they exist at the same time, essentially. And, yeah. So, anyways, these gods, they possess these powers, which I call austere powers. I call them austere powers because, well, austere, insane, right? Crazy, strong, powerful powers. I think it's kind of a repetitive thing to say austere powers, but I think it's pretty cool. So it's called austere powers. AUSTERE. Austere powers. Okay? These austere powers, there are so there are around 10 austere powers, which any god can possess, right? The first one that I would like to mention, doesn't mean it's the first, doesn't mean it's the most important. I'm not doing these in any sort of order that states importance over like this importance. Sure, some powers might be stronger than others in some ways, but every power has its strong suit and every power has its ability to conquer another. It just depends on the situation, the person who the god who possesses them, right? And the nature of the combat and the layout of the where they are fighting at, right? So, first one I would like to mention, the first austere power that I would like to mention is lightning. Lightning, electricity, however you want to word it, it is lightning. Simple, straightforward electricity, right? You can shoot lightning from the sky. You can shoot lightning from your hands. You can absorb lightning. You can utilize lightning in your body, so on. It is lightning. The second austere power I would like to bring up is wind. Wind. Air. Wind. Simple as that. You can fly. You can move things with the wind, right? You can hold force fields, maybe. Who knows? What is wind capable of? It's so much, all right? The next is, can you guess? It starts with a W. It is water. Water. The next austere power is water. Water, simple water, right? You can move water and you can pull water from the sky. You can create water. Water. Now, some powers have advantages over others, as I already mentioned. When I say you can create water, and I never mentioned that you can create electricity, it's a reason for that, right? Different powers have different abilities, which they've learned and honed over billions of years of having these powers, right? So, the next power, it starts with an M. I bet you won't guess this in a million years. You probably would have guessed Earth to begin with, like as the next power, but you were wrong. Or you probably would have guessed fire, maybe. But no, it's neither of those. It's actually mineral. So yeah, it's basically Earth, actually. And essentially mineral. I just thought Earth was a little it's Earth, right? And if you're a god, you don't really live on Earth. And so like I thought it was a little bit shallow minded, if you would. And so I was like, it's mineral. Because like mineral, you deal with rocks and you deal with crystals and you deal with fucking metals. Like mineral, yeah. Like, you know what I'm saying? I thought it made sense. So it was mineral. That's the next one. Because it makes sense to me. The next austere power is, drum roll please. Yeah, it's fire. It's fire, dude. It's fire. I mean, come on. That makes sense, right? It has to be fire. It has to be fire. It needs to be fire. Fire, right? They can burn themselves up. That's all I'm gonna say about fire. They can really hurt themselves. All right. Next, we have toxic. It's called, or I guess you can call it DNA. Essentially, I don't want to get too much into that power because it's pretty dope, and I don't want to. I don't want to mess it up. It's more chemistry, right? Chemistry. I'll call it that. Chemistry. But it's called toxic because I like toxic. I like the way it sounds. Then you have ice. Ice. That's probably one of my favorite austere powers just because of how simple it is, but how deadly I made it in Voodoo. It's actually awesome, and I love it because I love the characters who possess it. They are actually demons. They're not demons. They're gods, right? But they're demons, man. They're demons with it. They go crazy with it. I love them. The main one, her name is Cecilia, and she lives in the underworld, and she she runs the entire east of the underworld, and she does not allow anyone over there. It's all ice, okay? No one can come over there, or you're gonna die, right? Everybody just move to the west. Y'all can all live over there. Y'all can have it. I don't want it. You know, basically, it's how she is. It's all dark too, because the next power I'm gonna talk to you about is darkness. Darkness, and it is darkness essentially. It just covered the whole damn east in dark and ice and snow, and no one can go over there essentially. But darkness is a pretty dope power. I thought about it because the majority of the universe is darkness, and if you can't see something, what is even there to begin with? There's nothing there really. It's just void essentially, and I think that's pretty damn terrifying to think about. And so I included darkness or void into Voodoo as a power because I feel like it's a force of nature. Just like toxic, DNA, right? Chemistry. And then you have sound. Sound is relative only to the atmosphere that it exists in, right? Because outer space, there's zero sound, but every planetary object has some sort of atmosphere to it, which allows for sound to occur in some way, shape, form, or fashion. Sound does exist as a force of nature, and so I included it as Pan or sound in Voodoo because I thought it was pretty dope and cool. The next we have is quantum. Now, quantum operates on a scale which I don't even understand for it yet. I mean, I'm still developing the power as we speak. It's very dope so far because they are basically up here compared to everybody else, right? They're like, they outmatch everything. And so they're like also very different mind wise. They think a lot differently. So when I said this idea of tears when it came to chaos, if God was here, they would be here. You know what I'm saying? They've excelled. They've broken that barrier where gods they can't go past. They've broken that barrier and they've flown through it and they went off somewhere else and done their own thing. And yeah, I think that's pretty cool. Oh man, no. When I said that, now I previously said that my favorite power to write has been the ice, but that would be a lie because I have a couple other powers I like to write. Lightning was one of them, definitely. I love to write lightning because it is so in depth and cool, that power, that I think that most, when they hear about what I wrote about lightning, they would never expect it in a million years that I gave them this ability, these types of abilities when it came to like lightning. Because it's just like, it's like crazy. It's mind blowing. That's what I believe, right? And I don't want to toot my own horn, but I think I look at my story in a different way, right? I wrote it, sure, but they become living parts of their own, and I'm really just congratulating Lightning for being so awesome rather than talking about myself having been like, oh yeah, I'm so cool for writing it. It's more so that it's so cool for existing after it's been written. That's how I look at it. You know what I'm saying? So I really appreciate Lightning for existing in my mind and having been so cool to do. I think it's awesome. I think it excels. But if I really had to say, the next power that I want to talk about is Sunfire. Sunfire is exactly what it sounds like, right? It's actually really called light or Ignis, I call it, because that's who possesses it. They don't really have a name for it, but they call it Sunfire or light or Ignis. They really all call it Ignis, but I want the viewers to have something to grasp onto and dissect when they think about it, right? So they call themselves Ignis. You got Ignis Karma, you got Ignis Ra, you got Ignis Katrina, so on, right? And so they're the Ignis, the light, essentially, right? They're all kinship, but they possess Sunfire. And this is basically plasma, light, gravity. This is so many things encapsulated into one thing. It's solar, it's space, essentially. You can do so much under this power that is one of the strongest for that, because a lot of these other powers are just like this part of nature, but Ignis, light, it's like it's so many more things, right? It's so many more things that it's just like impossible to really like encapsulate it. And so that's why it's so special to me, because it has been a journey and a trip to write, because the characters who possess it, Karma being one of them, she's like my dog. That's my dog. You know what I'm saying? I love Karma, man. She's a beast. She goes out of her way to make shit happen, and she will make shit happen. You know what I'm saying? So yeah. Another one of my favorite characters is Yume. You won't get enough of her. She's amazing. She's cool as shit. Beck is another one, just because Beck's character arc, I think, is pretty dope. It goes from him being this menace to society to being a little bitch to back to being like on like a journey of like sensitivity and realness. That's just like, I don't want to just hurt things or hurt like everybody around me, but I actually have rhyme and reasoning to the things that I do. He basically wants to be good because he's seen like everything else around him just give less of a fuck about something that has zero protection. So he wants to kind of show like, holy shit. At the end of the day, man, I'm talking too much. Oh shit. Because it's awesome. I love Beck, man. He's a cool ass character. I also love Milo, man, and Obadiah, and I love all my characters, man. But yeah, the Mayans, that's what they're called, okay? Wait. The next power, the last one is apparently a life, which, I'm gonna be honest, I've done a thing with Voodoo where there are certain powers which are like extinct. I'm not sure if that's 10 powers though, but I don't want to get too deep into it, but there's about 3 powers that I've written in specifically to get rid of. It's a very complicated and complex story as of so far. I think it just needs a lot more organization in that sense, but also I think it has like a lot of things that I write about it that are like sort of like, just because I like the world building aspect of it. I love the idea that I'm making a whole immersive reality within it. And so it's less for the story and more for my own pleasure, I guess, or like just building of it, the building of the world. And so life is basically life, right? What grants consciousness? Life. Essentially is what it is, right? Consciousness, being. Why do these gods exist? What is their purpose? We'll get into that in another video, right? We'll get into that when I feel more confident in getting into that, right? Voodoo is a lot, man. And I hope people receive it well. That's all I can really ask. I hope that it's thought through when it's watched, because the thought that I put into it when I'm creating it is a lot, and it's very in depth, and it's very complex. And so I hope that if it's viewed, right? Hope's beyond wildest dreams. But I hope that when it's viewed, or if it's viewed, that people receive it with that type of scrutiny, with that type of complexity that I think it deserves. Because I feel like just looking at it and being entertained is cool, right? Because I write a lot of fight scenes and stuff for it. I write a lot of crazy shit for it. And I think that's a very valuable thing, right? You can love that. I appreciate that. I would love for people to be entertained by the things that I'm making, right? But more than anything, I think I want people to really appreciate and take their time to examine the story in a scrutinizing way that tries to examine the mental aspects of the characters, what they're going through, what they're thinking, that tries to examine the shape of the world and how it's where it is, that tries to examine different power play aspects of it, different thought processes of it. I want really for this shit to be like that, right? But I think that mostly I also enjoy the entertaining parts of it, like the fighting and so on. I think some of the fight scenes are pretty amazing, actually. Drawn out as they may be, but they are pretty amazing. So yeah, some of my characters get down. Anyways, yeah, that's the intro, I guess. It was all over the place, but I guess just to summarize what I spoke of, there are tiers to life. Everything possesses some sense of being in this world that allows it to be. There's energy within every living thing, which allows it to exist and influence the world around it. Different things have different levels of this power, which helps them to influence the world around them in different ways. Animals, plants, gods, humans, so on, right? Chaos is the main driving force of these living things and their influence onto the world. Chaos decides how much or how little, how well you influence the world around you. Should you have less chaos, your influence, such as like a plant, they breathe, they eat, they die. Your influence will be smaller onto the world. But when you have more chaos, such as a human, we breathe, we think, we die, we eat, we shit, we so on and so forth. We do a whole bunch of other things. We empathize, we command, we organize, right? There's different things that we do which allows us to exist on a different level. That allows us to exist on a different level than plants. And so we have more chaos, right? Simple as that. Chaos is the driving force of life in the world which we call voodoo. That's really it. The next video, I think I will be breaking down the different categories of beings beyond the human and what they are all capable of in some sense, way, shape, or form. So yeah, it's been real. I'm Marshad Willie Burton, Will Eric Sound, Marshad Burton, Max, Buddha, whatever you want to call me. And this has been Voodoo, the intro. I hope you enjoy my ranting about nothing.